All right, we'll go ahead and get started as people start to join in. So first off, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for joining our session today. My name is Kara Hunter, and I'm going to be hosting the session today on behalf of the SEG Women's Network. I am currently the chair of our Women's Network Committee, and today we've got the pleasure of having Luisa Jimenez here to present for us on transition technologies. So I'm going to briefly introduce Luisa and then allow her to, or pass it over to her after that. So Luisa is SLB's Director of Sales in Dallas, Fort Worth, San Antonio, and Austin, which is a position to which she was appointed in October 2020. Prior to her current role, Luisa serves as sales manager for SLB's fracturing business in North America and account manager for U.S. land strategic accounts from 2011 to 2020 in Houston. She joined SLB in 1995 as a field engineer in Latin America in the well construction team and worked on many drilling and completions projects throughout Colombia and Mexico. In addition to the drilling and completions roles, Luisa served in talent management with leadership positions including North and South America recruiting and training manager for the seismic businesses, personnel manager in Venezuela for all product lines, sales and commercial expert level mentor in SLB's professional career progression program, and North America ambassador for SLB's end-to-end emissions measurement business. Luisa was born in Bogota, Colombia. She immigrated to the United States in 1999 and established family roots in Texas. She also holds a Bachelor of Science in Petroleum Engineering from University of America in Bogota and a Master of Business Administration and Finance from St. Thomas University. And before I pass it over to her, just a brief reminder that you can put your questions into the Q&A and feel free to use that, and then we will take some of those questions towards the end. So Luisa, I will pass it on over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Kara, and everybody for sharing your lunch hour with me today. I'll go ahead and share my screen now. Kara, please confirm if you see the presentation.
I confirm, yes.
All right, good deal. So as Kara said, thank you for the introduction. I am currently VP of Sales and Commercial in Dallas, Fort Worth, San Antonio, and Austin for SLB. I welcome the opportunity to join the SEG Women Network webinar series to discuss the challenges of our current energy landscape and to talk about the solutions to those challenges. Also, to talk about how our professions bring in contributions to those solutions. I am Colombian born in Bogota and a mother, a petroleum engineer, and a sales leader. Besides that, I am also a life coach, and I believe 100% in mentoring for career development within our professions and within our communities. The picture represents what ended up being my workplace during my 20s. I joined the oil and gas industry inspired from a summer camp field trip that I was able to join when I was a teenager. This was sponsored by Texaco in Colombia. My mother worked for Texaco. She was an administrative assistant in the gas unit. In Bogota, I got to visit the office and talk to geologists, engineers, and managers, mostly American, and I developed an interest for exploration and development of oil and gas fields. Fast forward to my 20s, I graduated from petroleum engineering with a scholarship. I believe that scholarships change lives as well as mentoring. So I want to thank the SEG and the Women's Chapter for making it a priority and having that mentoring program for younger geologists, geophysicists, and engineers that are joining our industry. In my free time, I enjoy catching up with friends over a cup of coffee, watching some soccer over TV, or taking walks with my beagle. A short disclaimer in regard to the technologies I will be discussing here. Some of them we're still piloting, so the results may be different to what we are expressing in this presentation. The picture here, it's not me, but it's my uniform when I go to the field. Schlumberger is a company that has been in business for about 100 years. Now we have changed our name to SLB. We have about 99,000 employees and are present in about 120 countries. Our recent change in name and brighter colors correspond to a renowned commitment and an evolution that we want to do toward the solutions of the energy transition and the new energy landscape. Our mission is to create amazing technology that would unlock access to energy for the benefit of all. At the same time, we have to ensure sustainability, security, and equity of the access to that energy. My message today to all of you is one of optimism. I think we are walking towards substantial positive changes in life as we know it. We do have challenges today, but my perspective and what I will share today with you is that we have the tools, we have the technology and the brains to figure it out and transition swiftly into what is going to be the new shape of our life and the world by the end of the century. With that in mind, I want to revisit net zero. Just here. Why do we hear about net zero? What would it like to take there? Why net zero by 2050? Where did it come from? Who owns the actions? How do we do it? And what technologies are available now and what technologies will have another timeline? Net zero comes from the Paris Agreement, which commits nations to reducing the global carbon dioxide emissions. The idea is to limit the long-term increase in average global temperatures to 1.5 Celsius above pre-industrial levels. Why do we want to do that? We want to avoid potential adverse effects of not getting there, such as end of the century in the x-axis. The three dominant greenhouse gases are carbon dioxide of about 79%, methane about 12%, and nitrous oxide about 6%. Keep these numbers in mind. So most of the greenhouse gas emissions are CO2 and then methane, that is 12%. The nitrous oxide is the difference. The global emissions in last year, according to the EPA, were around 37 gigatons of CO2. So we're showing here the global emissions in gigatons of CO2 equivalent. This number is plus or minus 3% depending on what sources you're using for the data. The curves in the chart represent different scenarios modeled by climate analytics. This is where I borrowed the chart from. And climate analytics and other collaborators, there are nonprofit climate science and policy institutes. These are the emissions expected and the warming based on pledges and current policies. So when if we had no policies and no pledges in action, we will not reach the 1.5 Celsius degree target. With the addition of pledges and commitment by countries, we get closer to it. But the chart shows a gap. So for the gap, we're going to have to remove CO2 from the atmosphere, about 10 gigatons of CO2 a year by 2050. And then after that, we need to have increased capacity of about 20 gigatons of CO2 per year by 2100. And so we have a good task in front of us. Good news, what we have observed from SLB's interactions with our customers, which are operators of oil and gas companies for the most part, is that about 80% of them are already committed. 80% of our top 50 customers already committed to this net zero target. So there are actions that come with it. We need to talk about not only operators in oil and gas, but who else is in the landscape? Who owns the actions? What are the players? Who are the players? We've mentioned nations and we mentioned companies. When we look at nations, we realize that they need energy to maintain and improve the population's quality of life. In the map, you see the amount of energy that is currently utilized for different nations, representing their CO2 emissions as of 2022, per capita CO2 emissions. What we have right now going on is that US, India, China, Europe, Russia, and Japan are the higher emitters. We have the population growing in our world. Currently, we're at 8 billion, and it would reach 11 billion by the end of the century. Nations have committed to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. 88, that number represents the percent of the globe that has declared these targets. As we saw in the previous charts, it's important to have these targets in place. The United States currently is allocated about 14 to 15% of all of the greenhouse gas emissions. China and Russia have declared that they will be net zero by 2060 and India by 2070. For a balanced planet, humanity must reduce and eventually eliminate greenhouse gas emissions. Our future depends on us figuring out how to do it, at the same time providing the energy that is still needed for the nations that are not fully developed yet to be able to have a good standard of living for their population. Let's talk about the solutions and how we, engineers, geologists, geophysicists, play a part in it. Starting with the oil and gas companies. Operators are decarbonizing their operations, and they're doing it by few different actions, and we see some of them here. We will go deep into a few of them during this presentation. Reducing emissions from operations, replacing or fixing equipment, promoting high efficiency and reducing energy consumption, electrifying infrastructure and enabling access to renewable power, measuring, monitoring, and assessing operations to minimize impact, and reducing the physical size of projects. These are some of the actions we can take to reduce emissions. I want to bring your attention as we get into the details of what we need to tackle first and how we can do it. Back to methane. We talked about how methane is 12% of the total greenhouse gas emissions, not as much as CO2. Methane accounts for 1/3 of the current warming from human activities. Even though methane is only about 12% of the global gases emitted, it has the highest global warming potential. It's about 30 times, its global warming potential is about 30 times more than CO2. The warming potential is a measure of how much energy the emissions of 1 ton of gas will absorb over a given period of time, typically 100 years, and in relation to the emissions of 1 ton of carbon dioxide. So this is how it was calculated, that methane is 30 times, has 30 times higher warming potential. Even though methane does not stay in the atmosphere for longer than 10 years, it absorbs much more energy than CO2. Reducing methane leaks has high impact in lowering greenhouse gas emissions warming effects. The nations, our government, and companies have all embraced this statement, and there is a focus in it. Let's talk about, for example, our Inflation Reduction Act. In our Inflation Reduction Act, the EPA has been mandated, has been tasked with monitoring how companies, how the oil and gas industry is taking efforts in order to detect methane and correct those leaks. This picture that you see here is directly coming from the EPA website, from one of their documents that came out last year, where they are explaining where the rules apply. So if you go there, you can download it and find it there. The EPA's proposed methane rules apply to different oil and gas industry locations. Our government agrees with curbing methane emissions as a priority. So what we see that when the President Biden signed this in August of 2022, they are taking specific priority on production and processing well sites. So 1 to 4 is production and processing well site. You see 5 and 6 are gas transmission and storage areas. 7 to 9 represent distribution. Those are not covered by the EPA's rules. So from the distribution point to your house, that's not regulated by the EPA under the Inflation Act. Now, there is a situation of a reward, but also a punishment, kind of like the carrot and the stick. So in the legislation that was signed, EPA has funds that they can distribute, about 150 million, that they can distribute to companies, to operators, to help operators measure the methane and correct any leaks. At the same time, there are provisions for the EPA to establish penalties to operators that do not correct these leaks in a timely manner. An additional incentive to oil and gas operators today is that any methane that is leaked, they will have to pay royalties on it too, as if they had sold it. So this is another incentive to get things detected and taken care of when it comes to methane leaks. There is also money in the Inflation Regulatory Act for startups that are developing technology to detect the methane. The Inflation Reduction Act has money for this, and companies, including SLB, are applying for this type of grants in order to develop more technology and help the industry come up with the best way to quantify, identify the methane leak, and then correct it. Let's take a look at some of the technologies that are available today, focusing on methane detection. The use of these technologies is increasing. Depending on the distance from the fields and the sensor that is used, they have different types of resolution of detection minimums of limits. One of them is using satellites. They use an imaging spectrometer on board to measure the absorption of sunlight by methane. When we measure the size of a methane leak, we refer to it in kilograms of CH4, kilograms of methane per hour. The satellites are good for detecting large events, large emissions, about 200 to 5,000 kilograms of methane per hour. Satellites work in a way where they take actually images of about 150 square kilometers, and you can revisit that same area every day, so once a day. So one image per basin per day per satellite is, weather permitting, is what you will get. Other solutions that are closer to the land are aerial surveys. So they can scan hundreds of facilities per day, not just one location per day. And the limit of detection is from 3 to 35 kilograms of methane per hour. So these ones would be better. The aerial surveys are better on detecting smaller events than the satellites are. We also have actually handheld cameras, or OGI cameras, stands for optical gas imaging. These are actually some that are deployed to the actual facility, the tank facilities, the well site, and their limit of detection is quite low, so you can detect very small leaks. Sometimes what operators would do is they would identify a leak, a facility that has a leak with an aerial survey, and then they dispatch the crews to the actual facility with the OGI cameras and get to detecting more specifically where the leak is, because you can get them close to flanges, valves, or any other piece of equipment that you may be suspecting could be the source of the gas leak. As you can imagine, this is very intensive in terms of hours of personnel out there. So what we're seeing now is a trend to replacing these traditional methods by continuous monitoring of the methane. And we can do that in two ways. By the way, these technologies I'm describing here, these methods I'm describing here, all of them are offered by SLB and other companies that are investing in this area, including the continuous monitoring. So for continuous monitoring, we could use light detection and ranging cameras. That's a picture of how it will look like when they're detecting it. And what we call point sensors. These are permanently installed in the facilities. The LiDAR camera measures concentration and location, uses an inversion to calculate the leak rate. It can detect leaks up to 200 meters away from the camera. You need one camera per location. The point sensors are set up in the location in an array of 4, as you see it in the picture in the bottom. So in each corner, there is one sensor. They measure concentration of the leak and wind, and also use inversion to calculate the rate of the leak. These are ideal for well pads and tank batteries. The minimum leak detection is 10 kilograms per hour. If you have anything smaller than that, we're not going to detect it with this technology. So we know how to detect the methane. What operators do once a leak is detected is they go correct it. So the correction could be as easy as replacing a leaking valve for a more efficient one, or it could be replacing pneumatic systems that are using compressed gas, field gas today for air. In that way you reduce emissions. It could also be simply like a battery. In a battery, a tank was left open, and so go and correct this type of situations. So how about technologies that help us not emit the methane to start with, avoid the emission of methane, or reduce the emission of methane during our operations? In SLB, we call those transition technologies. We have actually a group of them, several of them that are qualified as transition technologies because they effectively help oil and gas companies avoid emissions. To date, we have accounted for over 700,000 tons of CO2 avoided using our different transition technologies. I'm going to talk about 3 of them here to illustrate how that is happening. Schlumberger has low emissions barrels. It may sound like something very simple, but it actually is a very low risk, high yield opportunity to reduce environmental impact. The right valve maintained properly will prevent fugitive emissions. So we have built this valve with special materials, and when we install it, it comes with a maintenance program that actually achieve 96% reduction in fugitive emissions. This is one of the examples of what we do, and actually helping today several of our customers. Obviously, the valves are API and ISO certified for low emissions in the industry. The BX Expecta is our surface multi-phase flow meter. So this flow meter, and you see the picture with the people there, is not that large when you look at it. It's probably smaller than the desk you are sitting at right now. And what it does is it effectively allows operators to account for the production of oil and gas and water, if you're producing any water, if you're using it to replace a separator, which several of our customers are. We have actually an application in the Eagle Ford with Ensign, where Ensign is allowing us to share this information. Is available in the website for people that are interested. This multi-phase flow meter is able to achieve accurate measurement, and it can replace a separator. So compared to a separator, it will not require, it will not have multiple sources of vented and fugitive methane emissions that occur in a separator because of the different pieces of equipment that are there. Depending on what type and size of the separator that we replace with the flow meter, we can save or avoid emitting somewhere between 50 or 500 metric tons of CO2 per year. So this is one of the technologies that we have. An additional benefit of this is that you're also reducing the size of the path that you need. We visited before in one of the slides that talked about what are the things that we can do in order to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and that is making smaller the size of projects, which in turn requires less machinery being mobilized and less emissions being emitted. A third example that I want to share with you today is our intelligent power management. This is actually an implementation to drilling operations. So in drilling a well, we have to drill more wells because we know the energy demands are going up. We need to continue drilling a number of wells. So how do we do it without causing excessive emissions during the drilling? When we're drilling, let's say a typical well in the Permian, it requires a 1,500 horsepower rig, which typically uses 4 diesel generators. Well, with this technology, we aim to replace all of those generators ultimately and drill a well without having to burn the diesel that those generators consume. So how we do it is initially we go and replace one of the 4 generators. So a 25% reduction in emissions. We install software. It's a combination of an engine management software and a battery. So what we do is with the software, we improve the ability or the utilization of the energy of the fuel and during the different operations that the rig is taking, that are taking place in the rig. So basically the efficiency, the software will allow for efficiency and save energy. And the energy that we're saving, say like, for example, when you're doing some of the activities that don't require a lot of effort in the rig side, you will be able to save that, like tripping, in the battery. And when you need that electricity, that extra power, then you will drain it from the battery instead of having that fourth generator. So that's how it eliminates one. Now, fast forward, our vision is to eliminate all of the generators. So for that, we will use hydrogen fuel cells. So what you will have delivered to location will be a 20-foot container that will include the hydrogen fuel cells and the battery. And you could have hydrogen delivered to location. And this hydrogen, if you can find green hydrogen, then it will mean that you are actually drilling your well without generating any emissions on site. We have already proven that we can do the 25% reduction by removing one of the four generators, one of the four diesel generators in place. And we have done that already. It says here 6 rigs, but we have done that 7 rigs and operating for about 6 months in 7 rigs. Before the end of the year, we want to be able to have a pilot where we actually have no diesel generation in location. So we have discussed what we have in terms of applications to oil and gas industry as we know it today. But how about new energy? New energy is a business that is growing and is getting the interest of many of the oil and gas companies. The perspective of SLB as a service company is that we look at what would the energy industry require from us. What is there a demand for? SLB does not own any gas fields or any oil fields. We do not generate revenue from selling oil and gas. We generate revenue from selling services or manufacturing products or selling consultancy or our project management interventions. So as a company, as any good company that wants to continue to exist and to grow and progress, we asked ourselves, where is the need, what is the demand other than the oil and gas core business that we have been participating on and continue to participate with the transition technologies? Where else could we play a role? SLB has created a separate section of the company called New Energies. So in New Energies, we have strategic JVs. I'm going to talk about 3 of them that we believe are an important part of the solution that the world needs for an effective energy transition and eventually our, the end of the century, eventually not have a lot of dependency from fossil fuels. So let's talk about some of those. 3 of these efforts. So the first JV I want to highlight is the Gambia JV. So SLB has better recognized manufacturing capacity in different product centers that we have around the world, specifically for this technology of generating the electrolysis or technology that will help us produce hydrogen without CO2 emissions. We're doing this in the Singapore Technology Center. So what we're doing is, today you can generate hydrogen. Hydrogen is generated mostly from methane. And so you split the methane and you obtain hydrogen. You can then try to make that hydrogen a low carbon hydrogen if you capture the carbon that is produced during that production of the hydrogen. A step forward will be to produce green hydrogen, which is produced without emissions. And so that's what you see in these electrolytes here. That's what SLB is trying to achieve, and it's trying to create the hydrogen from water. So this electrolyzer, that's what it will be able to achieve. Currently, we have pilot projects underway, utilizing the excess heat from industries like petrochemicals, cement, and steel in order to aid the process of the generation of the hydrogen, so that there is even less energy consumed in order to generate the hydrogen. Lithium is also one of the minerals that is being discussed a lot currently. There is a concern that the lithium mines are all overseas in China or Chile predominantly. Well, we do have those resources here in the US as well. And Neolith is the JV that we have put together, partnering with Pure Energy Minerals. So what SLB is focusing on is an alternative to generating enough lithium that we need for the energy transition. So in order to store energy from renewables, say wind or solar, you're going to need batteries. And for that, you're going to need lithium. And the general public thinks about lithium when they think about batteries for the cell phones or for the cars, but we also need it for storing large amounts of electricity generated by renewables. The process of extracting lithium today takes about 2 years because it involves evaporation. You need to have ponds where you have brine that you are extracting this lithium from. SLB wants to extract the lithium from brine as well in Nevada, but with a different method. So we have not produced any lithium yet. This is a pilot, but the different methodologies that we're testing would reduce the time for obtaining lithium from 2 years to weeks. And instead of having brine that you have to then dispose of, it will generate actually fresh water. So this is another place where not only SLB, but many other companies are investing money. SLB has a budget for research and engineering that is always known in the industry, that service companies, that's what we do. We bring in the technology. Well, 600 million of that we're committed right now toward the new energy JVs and research, such as this lithium extraction from Nevada. The third one I want to highlight is actually using geoenergy for heating and cooling buildings. And I saw that SCG is very actively watching this, because we know that nations are going to need to keep warm or keep cool all of the population that we're going to have, the growth that we're going to have. We saw we're going to be 11 billion soon. We're at 8 billion today. So heating and cooling buildings is one of those needs that we have that generate emissions. So how can we avoid that? We can use the energy, the temperature of the earth in order to do that. And the partnership that we have here is called Celsius Energy. I have a link here for you guys to go and check it out. So what we're doing is actually, we tested it on ourselves. So we have a building in France that hosts 2,000 people. It's a 4-story building. And what we did is we drilled about 10, there's not wells like we know the wells today, but they are shorter wells. They are closed loop wells that we drill, and they have a liquid in them that exchanges the heat that comes from the earth, or gets it, traps it. And then the system uses a heat exchanger and a heat pump. And what it does is it uses this energy from the earth in order to warm up the building or to cool it, depending on what the needs are. This has been highlighted in recent news and papers, and we have actually shown that it can be done in our own building. And so we have actually won a new contract in the south of France, where we're not only going to cool one building, but we're going to cool 12 buildings. For the one building in Clamart, we needed 10 of these closed loop wells, kind of like in a pyramid structure. And the whole structure in the surface is less than a small apartment, kind of like the footprint of all of what is needed is about 20 square meters, which is, like just a small studio apartment in our square feet. So I invite you to take a look at that video. For the project that we have just won, we're going to need 170 of those closed loop wells. And we're really excited about this opportunity and looking forward to expanding it. Right now, it is really popular in Europe, but I think this is totally something that will be have more of a development here in the US as well. And with this, I'll leave you with this message. Energy transition is an imperative and cannot be done without oil and gas, the oil and gas industry. We must measure and adjust, embrace it. It is good for business and humanity and for the planet. Thank you for your attention, and I open it up for questions.
Thank you very much, Luisa. Just a reminder, we have the Q&A option if you do want to enter any questions, and we'll be happy to take those. It was really interesting to see your transition from, what it means for net zero, and then the current technologies we have, as well as kind of future state and some of the pilots. So I appreciate you sharing that with us.
Of course. And as I said, I'm very positive in the outlook. And as geophysicists, the group here is mainly geophysicists. You know that you play a very important role finding those sources of heat down there when it comes to geoenergy or geothermal, which is different from geoenergy. But many of those find in the water, everything like that. So I think we have a unique position right now where we're not only going to witness this transition, but we get to be a part of it. We get to make a difference in it, to do something about it. So I think these are very exciting times to be alive.
It is.
Yes.
Do we have any questions? Please enter them into the chat. Let's see. We have one. Thank you, Michelle. So is SLB doing any research into direct air capture of CO2?
Yeah, not at this time. No, not at this time.
All right. Thank you for that. Any other questions? I'll give just one more minute for some questions to come through, and then if we're getting close to the time, so we can probably close it here shortly. So,
of course, yes.
Will you be able to share the presentation?
Yes.
Yep. All right. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Fidan. That was the question from Fidan. All right, Mary, thank you, Luisa, for the presentation. Please, are there any specific programs a student could undertake to be able to work She specifically says to work in SLB, but I would just say if there's any resources you're aware of where a student could even partner on some of these more new energy or transition technology opportunities.
So is her question to work in SLB or to partner with SLB?
I think it's both. It's potential work in SLB or kind of how to get involved.
The partnering kind of has a business component to it. So absolutely, we have active recruiting. We're recruiting for positions in the technology centers, manufacturing. We saw some of these new energy opportunities coming into the manufacturing area. We have always at slb.com a list of the positions open, not only for full-time employment, but in the case of the person that's asking, is for internships. So we do have internships available, and I will encourage you to go to slb.com careers and obtain the link and apply to these positions.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. Any other questions?
In terms of partnering, I'm not aware of the process of partnering as a JV. I'm not aware, but if the person can give me more details, please share my email, or I'll write it in here. I'll write my email here. And then we can, depending on what the interest is, I could definitely find the right person to talk to.
Sure. And we do have some research centers as well that I'm not sure we could potentially partner with. So there could be other opportunities there.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, I'm going to say going once. Any other questions? All right, well then we'll go ahead and close it for today. Thank you so much, Luisa, for your time and for your presentation and sharing all of that with our community. We really appreciate it. And thanks everyone.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, and I think we will go ahead and close. So thank you so much and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You too. Bye, everybody.